Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GEB America Podcast. I'm David Groves from here at GEB.TV. My host, Stephen Gunn, is with me, and we are glad to have you on the podcast. Of course, GEB America, the TV network that helps you live well. You can watch us on DirecTV, channel 363, as well as at GEB.TV, or in great markets over the air like KAZQ TV 32.4 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We appreciate those folks over there. Well, Stephen is here to introduce our guest and kick off what we're calling this show, which is Making Your Money Work for You in 2024. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and not necessarily those of GEB America, Oral Roberts University, or their employees. This program is not intended to offer investment, financial, medical, legal, or any other advice. Viewers should consult a subject matter professional regarding any such matters.
That's right, guys. Welcome. It's so good to be with you again here. We have a very special guest. I had the pleasure of interviewing him in our studio for a show we had many years ago, Mr. Jerry Robinson. Jerry, welcome back to the show with us here. And Jerry is from followthemoney.com joining us today. He's an economist, veteran trend trader, best-selling author, and has a passion for researching and teaching the Bible. He graciously shares his lectures online as well at truerichesradio.com. Jerry, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Well, let's just jump right in. This time of year, and I actually on the side, I do a little coaching in the morning myself, and that it's not uncommon to hear the parallel right now of people going, "Hey, it's time to get back in the gym, right? You got to get back to the gym and maybe focus on the health a bit more." How similar is our financial health and its level of importance, would you say? And then also maybe what are some ways that we can get back in shape with the personal finances?
Wow. Yeah, personal finance is a very big topic. And of course, as the older you get, the more important it seems to get. When you're younger, those of you who are listening in the audience today, you have the Adonis complex, maybe you're sub, I don't want to say a number, but you know what I mean. When you're younger, you feel like time is on your side, and you're right. Unfortunately, if you don't take advantage of that time being on your side, it really doesn't matter when it comes to finances. And this is a really important thing for those out there who are, thinking about their finances as we head into this new year. That, as many people know, the United States government is in a world of hurt when it comes to the amount of money that they spend and the amount of interest that they spend on the amount of money they spend. In addition, they also face a lot of unfunded liabilities. And so I think it's because we live in a comfortable society, there is the idea that somehow we can rely upon the federal government to take care of us if we fail to save. Well, in many ways, it is true that you can rely upon friends and family and the federal government in old age to help you with your finances. But many people don't prefer that. Taking care of our finances is extremely important. It's also important to our Christian witness. How it really wouldn't be a great witness if we spend our lives really not taking thought of any kind of preparation, not seeing evil afar off and taking preparation, and instead had to rely upon people who were, maybe even unsaved to take care of us. It seems very backwards. At the same time, there's also a risk of becoming overly obsessed with finances. And I think that would be the other side of the equation, where on one side, you could completely ignore finances, and that's detrimental. On the other side, you can become obsessed with them and think nothing about anything but money. This, of course, is a devastating path one can go down as well. So there's a really fine balance as believers that we have to find. I think to the second part of your question, what are some of the things that we can do? Well, I think the average person out there, sadly, has not been taught basic things that people should be taught when it comes to finance in high school or even in college. It's very, very strange that we don't learn how to balance a checkbook, or how to handle some of these very basic things that we're going to have to handle once we become adults. And so that means that we really need to educate ourselves. Education is probably the number one concept to take away. You can learn through books. You can learn through videos. You can learn, of course, through podcasts as well. I think education is the number one thing. And the education, of course, will inspire action. At least it should, if it's good education. Right. And those actions would include very basic things like putting aside a portion of your money every single time you get a paycheck, saving, what I call the profit principle. The Bible says that in all labor there is profit. But that's not true if you give all of your money away. So therefore, if you don't have any profit left over at the end, you've given it all away. Well, then you've given yourself no profit. That's a dangerous place to be. So saving, investing, giving, all of these are major themes that we can develop as we go on.
So one thing on that, I think, and when you say saving, let's just maybe kind of help flesh that a little bit. Like saving doesn't mean you put in a little a piggy bank and put in your room. And hope that maybe it might do something for you along the road. What are some ways, maybe an actual ways to save in a healthy financial approach?
Well, when it comes to saving, I think in terms of, when we go back to the profit principle that we had just stated. So there is a scripture in the book of Proverbs, 14:23. It says, "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury." And the idea here is that in all labor, there is profit. In other words, an individual's profit from his labor or his work is equal to the money that he saves. And so your profit is your savings. Like if you're running a business, the money that you put into the cash register from a sale is not necessarily your profit. Right. You have to take out all the expenses. What did that item cost? What's it cost to keep the lights on? Whatever's left over, that's the profit. And when we look at our own paychecks and we think, okay, I've worked all week long, I've got this paycheck now. If every single bit of it is given to Walmart, utility company, and everyone else, and oftentimes even more than the paycheck because of a Visa card or something, this is the shock moment. This is the moment where I was shocked, many years ago into saving. And I think sometimes that's what has to happen. In the world of health, you may get a negative report from your doctor, like, hey, your cholesterol is elevated, or, you may hear something like that from your doctor. And what that will do is it will spur action. You'll say, oh, wait a minute, I don't want this to happen to me. I need to take action. Well, this is the same thing when it comes to saving, that many people don't know that it's a problem until they find out that it's a problem. And so the best way to do this is to head this off of the pass, have that moment early in your life, as early as possible, that you realize that you need to save. Many people say, I don't need to save. I don't need to save. What do I need to save for? Well, there's plenty of reasons. There's always a reason to save. And when it comes to saving, the idea is that what I do and what I teach here at followthemoney.com is the importance of saving 15% of your income. Many people can't go from saving 0% of their paycheck to 15% immediately. So you may start with 1%, you may start with 2%, and then maybe you raise it slowly but surely. But saving, I believe, is just simply a part of our life that just must be. It must be a thing that we do. And if we don't get into that habit early, it can take us a long time to really get into that habit. One of the best ways to do that, of course, is through your employee savings, where it's forced savings. But, it's very, very important. And as I mentioned, the idea of laboring for no profit is absurd, but it is what many people do. Many people go to work 40 hours a week and they have nothing to show for it except the things that they buy at the store. And that's, they have nothing as far as profit tucked away. This is dangerous, especially in a world that's so debt leveraged.
So I think that with a lot of people, that's kind of the first, like you said, it's a shock. Your doctor tells you need to change your habits, you need to exercise, you need to change your diet. It's one of those things where you have to take account of, okay, are we living paycheck to paycheck? Why? Is it because we're going and buying things we don't need? And in some cases, that's not true. But in a lot of cases, you look at that paycheck, whatever's left over, you go, hey, let's go buy this for the house, or let's go have this extra meal out, or whatever it may be, at the detriment of saving towards that goal. And if that goal is 15% of your paycheck monthly, do you think that it's good for some people to kind of have that done automatically, where you kind of take that out of your hands, like you said, like definitely. An auto?
Absolutely. Yeah. Automatic savings is the best way to do it. Automate your savings. Some people have a difficult creating a budget. That certainly applies to many people. And I find even myself sometimes constrained by a rigid budget because life is a lot more complex and nuanced than many times what we might want to put on a piece of paper. So creating a budget, sometimes you may say that people say, I can't possibly do that, or I can't live within that budget. And it may discourage people. The best thing to do in my mind is to automate that savings and get it away from yourself before you even have a chance to touch it. This is especially true if you have a 401k at work and they offer some sort of match. You should absolutely be taking advantage of that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. If you have a company that offers you a match, you should at least save up to that place. Cutting out unnecessary expenses, is something also that people can do. Shopping smart, prioritizing high interest debt and getting rid of it so that you have more to save, limiting those impulse items and spending. I think it is very important when you go into the store to have a list and to stick to your list. These companies are, these corporations are very good at separating you from your money. So you've got to have a plan. You've got to invest as well. And so when you're saving, you're going to, in the way we teach, is that you're going to save 15% of your income forever, for as long until you're finally in distribution phase, until you're finally in that place where you're beginning to take money. You're saving 15% of your money during your working life. And the goal is to build that up to a 6-month liquid savings. So that way you have a cushion. If God is calling you to do something and you are underneath the burden of a bunch of debt and you have no savings to take care of anything, and you're stuck at a job because you can't move because you have to have that paycheck this week, there's no savings. Well, you're really locking yourself in. I think the devil has really caused us to become, I think he's used finances to really cause a lot of pain in the body of Christ through what I'm talking about here. There's a lot of people with callings they can't fulfill, or they feel they can't fulfill because they're underneath the weight of debt. They're shackled underneath, mortgage payment they can't afford, or auto payment they can't afford. So what you want to do is you want to build 6 months of liquid savings, and that way you have that cushion. It's there. If you lose your job, you're going to be okay for 6 months. You've got everything you need. And then once you've got that 6 months of savings, then you continue to save that 15%, but then you divert it to investments. So now you begin to invest. So saving and investing, two very different things. Saving is for, the things that you're going to need. And investing, of course, is putting your purchasing power into something that's going to continue to grow. That way your purchasing power is maintained. So saving and investing, two very different things, but saving cannot be overstated. And I think you bring up something very, very good. There is something in the body of Christ that suggests the idea that we don't need to do anything. We might even look at this Sermon on the Mount and say, look at the sparrows, God takes care of them. Why do I have to save any money? Well, I think that's pretty short-sighted. And I think the Bible has plenty of other things to say along that matter that show us that a prudent man foreseeth evil afar off and takes preparation. We have a lot of strange things happening in our time. We live in a dangerous age. We live in a very debt leveraged age. And if we walk through this world lackadaisical about this and not think about the damage that could be done from poor financial planning, we're going to find out maybe the hard way. And so it's important for us to be proactive in this matter.
And the purpose for our listeners of this program is not to offer financial advice, and we say that at the very beginning of the show. But we want you to think about the discipline and taking charge of your own life. And coming up in a few weeks, we're going to have someone on to talk about personal health and taking control of your health and working on your fitness level. But today we wanted to talk about how to make your money work in 2024. So the first point here is take a look at what you're doing, what you're spending. It's good to take control and discipline to where you can save. And as Jerry has said, it's good to have that emergency 6 months. And maybe you start small. You get a month, you get 3 months. Transmission goes out on the car. There's a major event at school the kids want to be a part of, and you don't have any money to do that. It makes it very hard. And, I think that it's good to kind of sit down and make a plan. But let's talk a little bit about making your money work. So you talk about being able to save and 401ks. 401ks are one of those great examples of free money if your employer is matching, and you're leaving free money really on the table when you don't take advantage of matching.
So true. Oh, absolutely. The idea here is that if you do have any kind of employer savings plan, and if it is a 401k, there's a couple of things that I would do if I found myself in that situation. The first thing I would do is I would go to my HR department and I would ask if they offer a Roth version of the 401k.
Mm-hmm.
They may not, but if they do, this may be, in my opinion, one of the very best vehicles that any individual could have access to, especially considering the amount of debt that the government is facing. With the Roth version of the 401k, or maybe people have heard of a Roth IRA. For those who are unfamiliar, what this simply means is that instead of receiving a tax benefit initially or immediately for contributing to the plan and then paying taxes later, the Roth allows you to place in the money and pay on after-tax money and then receive the both the principal and the growth, the interest or the capital appreciation later, tax-free. And quite frankly, with the amount of debt that the United States has, $34 trillion now, plus unfunded obligations, if we fast forward the tape 20 years or so, figure up how much time you have to retire, let's say it's 20 years from now, well, we would imagine that the amount of debt is going to be a lot higher, that the national debt will be much higher, the unfunded obligations will be greater, and therefore they're going to need more money. And the amount of money that's sitting in IRAs and 401ks, traditional, is going to be something that's going to be very, very appealing to politicians. So if you're able to move your, if you're able to save in an environment where you can save tax-free, like in a Roth, this is huge. So if I'm in that situation, I'm going to the HR department, I'm asking do I have a Roth option? If I don't, that's okay. I can always open up a Roth IRA, personal, and contribute to that on the side. But yes, the 401k should definitely be considered. And if there's a match on it, you should definitely save up to the match, in my opinion. Of course, that's not financial advice, but I think that's a great idea for anybody. Then as far as exceeding that, as far as saving more than what they match, that's a really big question mark, because in many cases, the 401k is not really the best place to invest, because most of the time your investment options are limited. And so therefore you don't have a great amount of investment options, and sometimes they're not that great, to be quite frank with you. So taking advantage of the match is a no-brainer, but going beyond the match, there may be other places to consider. And so that's what I would say regarding the 401k.
And on that, I think, like what you mentioned, opening your own potential Roth IRA may be, among other things, one of those options you could consider before you go anything past within the constructs of what your company is offering.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some options for people within a Roth IRA to invest in? Is it bonds? Is it large cap stocks? Is it certain ETFs? What are some options for people?
Sure. So when you're investing in a traditional 401k through an employer, typically for the sake of service, the 401k will only allow so many investment options. Otherwise, it would be crazy. Now, sometimes another thing you can do with your HR department is ask, do you have a brokerage link? Does this 401k have a brokerage link? That's the exact word that you would use, or a direct link of some kind to the market. And some do. And if that's the case, then you can expand those investment options within that existing 401k. That's a question you have to ask your HR department. Oftentimes, this stuff is not just completely put out in front of you. You have to go inquire. And so that would be the first thing to see. Now, other options that are available to you outside of the traditional investments, of course, in a 401k would be those things you were mentioning. And in a Roth IRA, you can also have the potential to self-direct your IRA. And what that means is that it would expand beyond paper assets. So you could actually open up a self-directed IRA. Or if you're a business owner out there listening to me today, you can also open up a self-directed 401k. a solo 401k for your own company. In this case, what this allows you to do is it allows you to pretty much invest in anything, whether it be a piece of real estate, whether it be a piece of someone's business, whether it be a stock or a cryptocurrency. It really doesn't matter. There's really only a few things you can't invest in when you self-direct. Most assets can be invested in. So there's lots of options for people. But again, it all begins with education. If there's a business owner out there listening to me today, who is trying, he really wants to save and he's looking for his options, one of the very best things you can do is look into a solo 401k. Or, if you're a small business owner just kind of running your own business, it's an incredible benefit where you're able to save, to the tune of, I think, up to around, and I may be wrong on this, but you can save anywhere between $40,000 and $60,000 per year in that solo. But if you're working for someone, you can also save a very large amount as well through your 401k. The IRAs are a bit more limited. You're only allowed to put in, up to $600 or $6,500 or so, all depending upon your age. It goes up to around that area. But yeah, there's plenty of different areas to be invested in. And I think when it comes to investment choices, that's another very important thing, being diversified. So we teach the importance of being diversified across various asset classes and not being overweighted in any one area. Why? Why not? Why not just invest all of your money in real estate? You say, well, real estate's always been great. We'll just put all my money in real estate and that'll be a great thing. Or I'll just put all my money into my 401k. I'll just save all of my money there. Well, the reason is that you have to be nimble in this environment and the rules of the game can change at any time. And the rules of the game are set by the IRS code. And so the Congress makes the rules. And the way the rules are set up today, and it shouldn't shock anyone, is that it favors people who are employers, not employees. It favors people who write paychecks, not people who receive paychecks. It favors those who buy real estate, not those who buy, clothes at the store, at the mall. So when you look at the rules of the game, you want to try to align your finances in a way where you're benefiting from the rules of the game. And the other reason why you don't want to put all of your money into one thing is because the rules of the game can change at any time. They can change at any time. So if you're over leveraged all in real estate, say real estate's the best thing that ever. Well, I agree. I like real estate. I think it's one of the best asset classes out there. But because the rules of the game can change, I'm not going to put all of my money into that single asset class. I'm going to be spread out. So I'm going to have some real estate. I'm going to have some stocks. I'm going to have some cryptocurrency. I'm going to invest in my own business. I'm going to have, or in someone else's business. I'm going to also find other things that I can do to put my money. I'm going to have some cash. I'm going to have, maybe some bonds, all depending upon my age. But the point is that we want to really create an orchestra. We want to create a symphony here of different assets working together, as opposed to trying to find one single asset and put all of our money into it and think we've done our job. This keeps us much more nimble and ready for any kind of changes that may occur. And I suspect there will be changes in the rules of the game, plenty over the next several years, as the government tries to figure out how to pay its bills.
Before Stephen asks his next question, I just want to make the point. I want our listeners to hear what Jerry's saying on that is education's key. You hear this if you go online and you do any kind of reading. Do your own research and seek the advice of a professional financial advisor, because as he said, time is on your side when you're younger. But once you start getting into that middle age and you can see in the distance retirement is coming, or at least what you are hoping is a point where you can take some distribution and maybe not have to work 40 hours a week, there is so much wisdom that you can gain by not only researching it yourself, educating yourself, not being intimidated or afraid to go online and read about these things, and to sit down with an advisor and take control of your finances, just like you would take control, as Stephen said at the beginning, of your own health and going to the gym and making changes in your diet. This is really a great time here at the beginning of the year to say, you know what, we're going to do things different, and we're going to find a way to get to that point. Otherwise, next year, Christmas time, New Year's, you're like, here we are again. 2025 is coming, and I wasted the year not taking control of things like my finances or my health.
Yeah, great thing. Actually, I was going to say, kind of paralleling that gym, example we started off with. I mean, how many people, do we know or come across in our life that maybe they think they can have the membership, they can drive by the gym, and somehow that's going to change them and be their best version, right? They can go by, they're close. They're so close. They know the gym. They know what it looks like. They know what that elliptical looks like.
Maybe they did something, it got sore.
Maybe they actually, they stepped on it a few times and thought that was just going to change a one-time go. But I think what I'm hearing from you, Jerry, is that this is, paralleling this is that really it takes a consistent long-term plan and action. Yes. And steps, consistency. And that's the same way I would say in health, is that it takes the consistency there. Just from education perspective here, like what Dave and I both at one point in time in our lives have had life insurance licenses. What can you speak on just educationally is the life insurance piece to the investment puzzle? Is there more out there, things like that people could utilize to help their long-term, financial plans, maybe in a
part of your life financial plan.
And
I will say this, Jerry, before you answer, is that I've met many Christians that are just kind of benign, kind of like meh when it comes to life insurance. But yet, how many of us know people that prematurely a spouse passed away and it put them in a really bad position, and they had to then liquidate what they had saved?
I can tell you so many stories, and you probably can too with your experience in life insurance. Life insurance is a foundational piece of every financial plan, in my opinion. Mostly, I should say. There are probably a few exceptions we could think of, the people who just don't need life insurance. But for the most part, I would say if you have anything to protect, life insurance is vital. I've had a life insurance license since 2008. I've helped people with life insurance over the years. I think it's a wonderful tool. Some people like to bash life insurance as if it's something to be ashamed of. I think that is foolish. In fact, I remember a case where someone was coming in to buy life insurance at the time. This was many years ago when I actually worked as a financial advisor, which I no longer work as a financial advisor today, but I still hold a life insurance license and still practice because I believe so firmly in life insurance as a tool for estate planning, for business planning, and for personal financial planning. But I have horror stories of people who said I need to do that. And then they passed away, leaving a mess for their families. This is also, I think this is an interesting topic when it comes to Christians, because Christians oftentimes may look at life insurance and say, I don't know, is that biblical? Am I living in fear by buying life insurance? I think all of these ideas are wrong, in my opinion. I think that life insurance is one of the ways that we can really bless our families and leave an inheritance for our children and our children's children. I don't think it's unbiblical in the least. I would say that life insurance, you can either rent it or you can own it. Of course, term insurance plays a role. And for most people, it may be enough. For others, they may need permanent insurance. But I would say that no one should shy away from that discussion. And I would quite frankly even go further and say this, that the life insurance agent in your life, whoever that is, that person is going to have a tougher talk with you than almost anyone else, and maybe except an attorney, who will actually, and sometimes even attorneys won't ask these tough questions. The life insurance agent really speaks for those who can't speak for themselves. Whenever I sit in front of a client and they have a child, I think of myself as speaking for that child. That child can't speak for himself. That 5-year-old can't look at the daddy who works, 50 hours a week and say, Daddy, have you taken care of me? Or, am I going to be okay if something happens to you? If you get in a wreck today, am I going to be okay? The child doesn't even know that. Half the time, if it's the spouse may not even be thinking about that. It's the life insurance agent who speaks for those who can't speak for themselves. They advocate for that family, and they make sure that if anything disastrous comes upon that family, that there will be financial healing there to be able to help them weather the storm that they have to go through. So life insurance is especially important to me. I've seen it change people's lives, and I am a very big proponent of people considering it for their own situation. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a foundational piece. I think it's a piece that should also be front-loaded. And I don't think it's just life insurance, even though that's my specialty. I don't think it's just life insurance. I think that all forms of insurance should be considered, maybe not bought, but considered. The worst thing that can happen to someone is they can say, I ended up becoming disabled and I didn't know that I could buy disability insurance. Nobody ever told me. I ended up needing to go to a nursing home, but nobody told me I could have bought long-term and care insurance. I wish I would have known. This is the role that the insurance agent plays. He needs to be bold and make these things known. People can reject that insurance, but they need to own their decision.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't want to make it. I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I just had a real quick note there. I was going to say, I sat down for a little while, many years ago. I was in the mortgage industry, and we had those riders you could have, add on to your mortgage refinances, where you actually had the ability, if something happened, they could pay off the balance or cover the payments. And for so many, when I was getting started, I was always scared. I felt like I was inconveniencing them.
Sure.
And until the first time somebody came in,
exactly,
after having something happen, and
Yes.
they got, I took that. You mean I have my payments being, and that reassurance and that peace for them
made all the difference.
I made all the difference for them and for me, right? Because they were so thankful and grateful we actually offered it, and I was so thankful that I had a chance to see that, to go, okay, well, that's the reason we have that kind of option. That's the reason people need to consider these kind of things. So where if somebody says, hey, for whatever price per small amount, maybe nominal, that you add this on there, give it some thought. Talk to your advisor, get some information. Make good choices, good decisions, good informed decisions before you just naysay that it's not going to be worth it.
I have to really stress what you've said, because you've said something extremely important, and I think it's very important for those listening, because this is a little subtle, important point that most people, if they're not thinking about it too hard, they may miss it. And that is that there's an old saying that offense will fill up a stadium, but defense wins the championships. The biggest problems I've seen over the course of my career with individuals in finances is not necessarily that they're not getting out there and being aggressive and trying to invest in stocks or cryptocurrencies or doing something like that. The main thing is that they will build a castle and they won't have a moat around it. So one of the worst things I ever saw was a very high net worth dentist that was a client, and he T-boned a student coming out of a university parking lot who was a medical student. So here's a dentist who's got tons of money, and he had bald. I'm not going to name the company, but you've probably seen him on television. Very bald auto insurance, and it was very cheap. Oh, he saved a ton of money on his insurance. And so he was so happy that he had cheap auto insurance. And guess what? He had no liability policy either. He had no umbrella policy to protect him. Had he hurt somebody in his office, he had malpractice insurance. But when he T-boned the medical student and put him in a wheelchair, now that attorney for that young medical student took everything. And here this guy was, he had done everything right. He thought he had done, he had saved money, he had invested aggressively, he had built a practice, but his cheap auto insurance left a huge, massive hole, and they came in and raided his whole castle because of it. So in other words, it's not just, and we teach this, by the way, the importance of the right order. You can put the cart before the horse.
Right.
We have something completely free on our website, followthemoney.com/5 levels. And it's our 5 levels of financial freedom. And we front load these insurance discussions to make sure that as you build your financial castle, that your moat is correspondingly also growing. So the size of your castle will determine the size of the moat that you need. A very, very important point you brought up.
So, quick recap, and then in the time we have left, we're going to go over a few topics here, rapid fire. But to this point, we've talked about taking control of your money in 2024, making your money work for you. First of all, is address things like spending habits and budgets and debt. Are there things you need to pay off? Are there things that you need to consider, like insurance? And then secondly, get that savings going. What are the things that you need? It's biblical to save. It's biblical to as he stated, lay up an inheritance for your children and your children's children. And so those are some simple little things that you can do is knowing where your dollars are going. If you don't know at the end of the month where all the paychecks went, well, that's obviously a huge problem. Taking control of that. So in the time left, Jerry, I'm gonna put out a few terms to you, and if you could just maybe kind of define for our listeners, they've heard these, but they don't know what it means. And as an educational, the first one is this idea of something called DCA. What does it mean to DCA?
To DCA means to regularly and consistently invest into assets. You can DCA into many different assets, and I actually have my own personal DCA strategy. I think everyone should. I'll give you a perfect example. Every Monday, we're recording this on a Monday, every Monday, my wife and I, we will DCA, or dollar cost average, some money into particular asset. And so every Monday, that's our DCA day, and it's every single week. So if it's Monday, we're investing. So it's a part of our life. It's a part of the thing that we do. So dollar cost averaging is probably one of the very best ways for people to invest. It allows them to buy, if you're buying stocks, for example, it allows you to buy more shares when they're cheap, and it allows you to buy less shares when they're expensive, which is exactly the way to do it. Mm-hmm. So DCA, a fundamental component, I think, of everybody's financial plan. Even if you can only DCA or dollar cost average $25 a week, right. Just do whatever you can. Start where you are and then grow it. But the important part of it is the habit. To start that habit, even if it's small, and just keep the habit. The habit of investing especially through dollar cost averaging, is something that you never want to stop once you start it.
Okay, our next term is this investment vehicle called an ETF. A lot of people see this. We've been hearing about mutual funds for years. What's an ETF?
Yeah, so the ETFs are very popular. I really like ETFs for trading purposes and also for longer term investing, especially the index funds. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. It's simply it's very similar to a mutual fund, except that it trades like a stock, and it's typically much lower fees. Not always, but typically much lower fees. And quite frankly, one of the biggest ETFs, in fact, I think it is the biggest ETF, the S&P 500 ETF, SPY. Those of you who've ever heard of Warren Buffett has a financial plan for his wife. The day that Warren Buffett dies, 90% of all of his wealth that he's going to transfer to his wife is going to go into SPY, into an ETF, because he said that most mutual funds and nearly all hedge funds cannot beat the S&P 500 over any kind of time period. So he said the best place to put his money is into the S&P 500. So the ETF is a powerful vehicle for investing and trading, and it's typically lower expense than a mutual fund.
Very good. Stephen, you have one.
I do. Sorry, my mic was acting weird. I had to make sure it was working again. All right. So Jerry, talk to us a little bit just from an educational level. What is Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is a currency without a government. It's a form of self-authenticating value exchange. It is one of the most novel technologies that has ever been created. I was so fortunate to learn about Bitcoin in 2012. I had a friend who was one of the very earliest adopters. In fact, he may have been one of the very early adopters of all, by the name of Trace Mayer. I was fortunate. I was running a podcast. I still run my Follow the Money podcast. It was back in 2012, and I was interviewing him about something else. He came on and he said, have you ever heard of this thing called Bitcoin? This is 2012. I said, no, I never heard. He said, you really ought to buy some. And at the time, it was trading for less than $25 or whatever. It went on, of course, to do very well. Yes. And so we've been talking about Bitcoin on our podcast, since 2012, and sharing this with our folks. Many of our folks have become wildly wealthy just from investing in a few of those. In fact, back then we used to say, hey, just buy 1 or 2 Bitcoin, or even buy 10. It was less than $1,000 to buy 10 of them at the time. Right. Bitcoin has transformed finance because it removes the need for an intermediary. This has infuriated banks. This has infuriated the traditional status quo, the traditional finance. And so they're trying to figure out what to do with it. There's been a big battle brewing in Washington about Bitcoin, of course, the SEC and all of this. But Bitcoin ultimately is a currency without a government. It is a form of self-authenticating value exchange. You need no one to clear it. You need no one to confirm it as far as a third party. It's just, so in other words, I'll put it to you this way. If I wanted to send $10 million to someone in London right now, I have several ways to do it, but they're all very expensive traditionally. Quite frankly, if I went down to the bank and said, I need to wire $10 million to London, it would be cheaper for me to buy a plane ticket and to
Right.
and to take the briefcase and fly it over there and go over there and get a hotel and stay there for a day and hand off the briefcase and come back. It would be cheaper than actually paying the bank the fee. But with Bitcoin, I can make that move for pennies. I can send $10 million around the world for pennies. So what this has done is that as people become familiar with what Bitcoin is, they're able to transfer money without the expensive third parties and without, of course, the massive expense that's typically associated with that. So it's a real step forward in finance. It's a real step backward for the government because it exposes them and their bloated systems that now are coming under fire because there's a better way. So I think it's improving finance. I think we're living in a really interesting time with Bitcoin today, and we're all learning about it.
Yeah, definitely want to have you back to talk more specifically on cryptocurrency and what is it, and because I know there's
Sure.
different ones. I mean, there's thousands, but there's also different protocols, as we know, proof of work versus proof of stake, and all these things that I'm sure our listeners are like, "What are you saying?" But along those lines, can you real briefly tell us, from an educational standpoint, what is then a blockchain? Because I know, and we're getting ready to have some innovative people on in the next few weeks talk about blockchain technology and how it's being used. But what is a blockchain with regard to finance?
Well, it's really just simply a ledger. It's a ledger. It's a form of keeping track, just like you would use a ledger for. It's triple entry bookkeeping. That's a really good question to try to explain what a blockchain is, because you think about what blockchains really are. They're really just a permanent record of all the different transactions that have occurred, and therefore those can be open and permissionless, or they can be permissioned, they can be closed. So blockchains are very useful in that respect. And we are already seeing, quite frankly, which I think is very interesting, is that the Federal Reserve here is already talking about a digital dollar. They haven't released it yet, but they've been testing it. China's already released its own digital yuan. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at that, you think to yourself, that's really interesting, because the white paper on Bitcoin came out Halloween, October 31st, I think it was 2008. That's an interesting day. Bitcoin, in many ways, and this may be strange for your audience, but I think they would really appreciate this, is the white paper on Bitcoin was put out October 31st, 2008, and it contained grievances against the current system. And it offered decentralization. It said basically everything is too centralized. We're providing something decentralized. This was put out, this white paper, that stunned the world, was put out on October 31st, 2008. What's interesting is if you go back to October 31st, 1517, that was the same day that Martin Luther was nailing his 95 Theses to the Wittenberg Church, talking, and ultimately what this was a decentralization. So just as Protestantism is a decentralization of the church from the centralized power of Catholicism, right? So Protestantism comes out of Catholicism. It's not something new. It comes out of. Martin Luther was a Catholic. I mean, in other words, so what they're doing is they're coming out of it and they are decentralizing it. They want decentralized. They don't like the centralized powers. Well, this is what Bitcoin is doing. It's saying, this helps people who are listening understand this very quickly, that Bitcoin is saying, we don't like the centralized financial system. We want a decentralized financial system. And so Bitcoin is born. But it's interesting the date that it was released. It's kind of a throwback to another decentralization moment with the Protestant church, and also, quite frankly, the United States. was an attempt at decentralization in some way,
Right.
Decentralizing from the European powers.
Yeah, that's good examples. I think that hopefully that helps people kind of see. Because I have to say, I remember when we had the conversation several years back, I was like, okay, what
Right.
are we talking about here? Dave was a little bit ahead of me on it, and I'm like, where blockchain? I got some chain link fence back there. Where are we at with this?
That's been a topic I've been asked to talk about a lot. I've done a lot of courses on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So anytime you guys want to talk about that, we can really go deep and really talk about the philosophy behind it too, which I think is very, very interesting, even from a Christian perspective.
And I think that for those that are a little bit savvy to the concept, they know that 2024 is considered to be a pretty important year with regard to the whole industry, and a lot of expectation that this year is going to be a good year for investing, for your investments, that type of thing. So I think it's interesting. Stephen has one last term we wanted to hit before we close out the show.
Yes. Now, obviously, when we're check yes or no is a whole different conversation, but we're talking about options here. So, like options for people who investments. What are options?
So options are basically what we would say derivatives. Best way to give this example would say, so I wrote a book called Bankruptcy of Our Nation. So I am the author. The book is a derivative of me. It came out of my head. It's a derivative of me. Or we could say an apple is a derivative of an apple tree. The tree is, of course, the producer of the apple. The apple is a derivative of the tree. So the option is a derivative. It's derived from something underlying. And in this case, typically options for most people would probably be on an underlying future or an underlying stock. So in essence, what this allows us to do with options, and options are very powerful tools for those who know how to use them, and typically for trading, they're not really for investing.
Sure.
But the option then gives you power to be able to control an asset without actually having to own the asset. And that there's reasons why you might benefit from that. There's reasons why you might want to do that. Typically, it's to get to be able to control a large amount of some stock or some future without all of the necessary money that's required to control that much. If you know what you're doing with options, you can really succeed. We have a great course we have a whole 6-hour course on our website about options trading. Very powerful stuff. But if you don't know what you're doing, you really want to educate yourself, because you could hurt yourself. Just like with anything in finance,
Right.
Yeah, education being the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Don't go into any situation without having done the research. And as we said at the beginning of the show, do your research, consult an advisor, just like you consult your doctor before you start a new exercise program, because you want to protect your self and your assets. And there are so many things online now. Before we close, Jerry, at the bottom of the description of the podcast, I've got a number of links there people can click on to get more information and to connect with you. But what are some ways, social media handles, website, if you could tell folks again how they can learn more about what you do?
Thank you so much. So the website is followthemoney.com. We approach the economy and finances and investing and trading all from a biblical perspective. Followthemoney.com. We have a free podcast there. They can sign up for our free email. But in addition to that, they can also find me on Twitter. That is FTM, like Follow the Money, FTM Daily. So at FTM Daily. And then you also had mentioned our Bible teachings, and we've done so many over the years. I was ordained, back in 2003. So it's a passion of mine to share and help people with understanding the Bible. And they can find that website, truerichesradio.com. We're very committed to the gospel nonviolence. And so I think people would find a lot of value at truerichesradio.com for those who want to dig deeper into our Bible studies. We even have some things on finance over there as well.
Gospel nonviolence. What do you mean by that?
Following the nonviolent way of basically, when you look at Jesus Christ, you'll see that never during his life did he kill or maim. And when we look at Jesus, we see nonviolent love of friends and enemies. This is what we're called to copy. This is what we're called to emulate. Peter was called to emulate it. Paul was called to emulate it, and we are too. And so nonviolent love of friends and enemies is what we believe we're called to do. And we see that many times that's not what happens. In fact, if you look at Hitler's army, people will often point to Hitler and they'll say, look, Hitler, we have to go kill because of Hitler. And you look at Hitler's army and you find out that many of them were practicing Christians. Many of them went to Lutheran churches. They went to the state church. They believed that they were killing for Jesus. They believed that they were killing for God. When we believe that we're killing for God, I would suggest to you, we are on the wrong side. God doesn't want us to kill anyone, and he certainly isn't calling us to kill people. So he calls us to follow him, a nonviolent love of friends and enemies. And had the Nazi Germans had someone stand up and tell them about the real Jesus, about how he shows nonviolent love to his friends and enemies, then we could have stopped that massacre without bullets. But instead, the church endorsed the war. And quite frankly, if you look at a German soldier, look at their belt buckle from that time, it says Gott mit uns, which literally means in German, God with us. It means Emmanuel. They believe that God was on their side. Don't we all when we kill? Don't we all? Isn't that how it works? If you don't think God's on your side, would you kill? Of course not. So the point is that we can't get to peace without following the Prince of Peace. You can't follow Jack the Ripper through nonviolence, and you can't follow Jesus through violence.
Very good. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on and talking about how we can, in 2024, make our money work and just make some changes. Consider how we can better educate ourselves so that we don't get to the end of the year and go and look back and think, wow, I just kind of floated. I just kind of did the same thing. I just lived paycheck to paycheck. I just, it's kind of like, this was going to be the year I was going to read the Bible all the way through. Make those changes now. Get that education, spend time, in the Word, looking at these topics, and take control of those things. Because we talked about this on an earlier podcast. One of our guests about the power of what we call that circle we live in, and that power that keeps us inside of that comfort zone. And when you step out of that comfort zone, there's so many obstacles, so many things trying to push you back into it. And it is hard to make changes in a lot of different areas of your life, personally, financial. Maybe this is the year where you need to be consistent with your church attendance, with your tithe. Maybe this is the year where you need to spend more time with your kids and not always at that job. So think about those things, pray about those things. And last thing, Jerry, would you mind praying for our audience and as we close out the program?
I would be honored to. And right before I do, I want to reiterate what you had just said, the importance of everything you've heard today. Remember, you always want to talk to a trusted financial advisor. Reach out to someone who can really give you a financial x-ray of your situation. Don't do your financial planning on radio. Okay? And with that said, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to you. You're so good to us. You're so kind to us. We have a brand new year ahead. Father, every single listener, I pray that you bring them peace. Bring them peace in this new year. Lord, I pray that you give them understanding as to why finances are important for them. Lord, teach them gently. Teach them with care and with love, as you always do. Lord, help us to understand the areas that we can improve in our finances. And Lord, I just pray for every single person within the sound of my voice that if they don't know Jesus, then Lord, I pray in the name of Jesus that you would send someone to talk to them. Maybe it's this program right now, or maybe it's someone that's a loved one or a friend. Lord, I just pray that they would reach out to you and know that you're trustworthy, that you can be trusted, and that you care for them deeply, and they can cast all their cares upon you. Father, thank you for your empowerment for our finances this year. And Lord, I thank you so much for these two brothers. I pray that you strengthen them and give them guidance this new year as they continue to do your work. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thank you, Jerry, again for joining us today on the GEB America Podcast. Remember to go to geb.tv for more information on the network and to listen to back episodes. And we hope that you will subscribe, follow, and share the podcast with your friends. Remember, every Tuesday, a new episode drops. So hit that subscribe and follow us. And we look forward to seeing you next time right here for another great episode of the podcast.